Hello, ya wrong'un. It's a busy old time around the world. We've got the inauguration of Trump just happening. We've got the Southport statements from 2T Ikea. And you may have missed that Channel 5 ran a documentary on Michelle Mone. Well, here's the update from that documentary. There's some details within the doc that you may not know or you might have missed because of all the stuff. You might have been watching the Donald and all of his executive orders, signing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. But let me tell you, let's have a dive into this, the details within this documentary. And it's covered everything. It's a detailed story of her rise to prominence, to fame, to the Lords as a baroness. But it also covers the personal protection equipment, PPE, being not fit for use. The question that was sort of an underlying story arc was, who made the money from the manufacture of the PPE? And Michelle and her husband could lose their freedom over all of this. The government are actually suing their company that organised the PPE for the government, the £200 million worth of PPE for the government. Now, the National Crime Agency is probing Michelle Mone, her husband, and MedPro. They're actually looking at possible conspiracy to defraud. They're also looking at fraud by misrepresentation. They're also looking at bribery. So it's fairly weighty, fairly heavy, what's being alleged. But the National Crime Agency are doing their inquiry, and I'm sure their output will arrive later on in the year. Michelle Mone and her husband obviously deny any wrongdoing. They've not been arrested. Rachel from Accounts, or should that be Rachel from Complaints, has appointed a COVID corruption minister called Tom Heho, and he started work last month. So he has the job, Tom Heho has the job of looking into who got and where and why £13 billion for PPE and contracts from the government during lockdown. So you and I were struggling at home, if I am allowed to speak for myself, we were locked down at home whilst these people, for want of a better word, were absolutely coining it in. Now, within the doc, they reckon that the government gave them over 200 million as a contract for PPE. The profit margin was 30%, which is over £60 million. That's profit, not turnover, profit. So the report from the National Crime Agency, from Tom Heho, the COVID corruption minister, they're expecting the report back later in the year. Now, a spokesperson for Baroness Mone and Doug Barrowman, her husband, and I'm going to have to read this for accuracy purposes. Baroness Mone and Mr. Barrowman have provided full and detailed statements to the National Crime Agency and have cooperated with the investigation throughout. They have been made scapegoats for the dangerous incompetence and corruption of the previous government. The incompetence of the government is such that the journey of the gowns cannot be properly tracked, and they were stored for an inappropriate length of time in poor conditions. I'm quoting. Mr. Barrowman's consortium successfully supplied 210 million type IIR masks, all of which were deployed in the NHS. Neither Baroness Mone nor Mr. Barrowman have ever met Jonathan Code. Now, he was the PR exec within the documentary that was quoted in the programme, who had been subcontracted by their previous media solicitors. Now, it follows that they did not provide him with instructions to, and again I'm quoting, lie to the press. Michael Gove has subsequently said, Baroness Mone did not inform me of her involvement with MedPro nor that she would financially benefit. I have subsequently cooperated with an ongoing National Crime Agency inquiry. Almost all procurement decisions regarding PPE for healthcare workers during the pandemic were made by the Department of Health and Social Care. I did not award any contract, let alone to Baroness Mone. The allegation of corruption is therefore nonsensical. Well, that was the direct quote from Michael Gove, and quote from a representative of Michelle Mone and her husband. Now, it all felt a bit... So it was quite showbiz at the beginning. Only when it got to the sort of last 10-15 minutes did really get to the meat of the difficulty and how much money is floating around. So the government, on the one hand, have an inquiry. They're not calling it an investigation. They're calling it an inquiry by the National Crime Agency, looking into who got what and when and how and why, all of that. So is the COVID corruption minister, Tom Heho. So the first question that naturally trips from the tongue is, how did MedPro come by the £200 million in funding? Who was the decision maker? And when will there be any output from the National Crime Agency? Because it's all very grey. It's not black and white. Unusual for the legal industry, but the National Crime Agency, we shall wait. Because the whole country wants to know £13 billion worth of stuff, and some of it not even fit for purpose. So the process will continue. Tomorrow's another day. But if you do get a chance, I would watch this documentary on Michelle Mone and her husband, Mr. Barrowman, because it's very interesting. Some of it's quite heart-rending, but it is interesting. And if there's any further developments, as soon as I get them, I will bring them here for you. So thank you for your likes, your subscriptions, but most of all, your indulgence. My name's Adrian Allen, and I shall see you in the next video.